Lieutenant Kate Morrison was having a quiet night shift on the Terran Defense Station Olympus when everything changed. She sat at her communications console, monitoring the usual background noise from deep space. Stars whispered their ancient songs through radio waves, and distant pulsars beat their steady rhythm across the void. It was peaceful work, the kind that let her mind wander to thoughts of home and the coffee shop where she used to work before joining the military. Then she heard something different. At first, it was just a whisper buried in the cosmic static. Kate frowned and adjusted her instruments, thinking it might be interference from the solar arrays. But as she fine-tuned the signal, a pattern emerged. This was not natural background radiation. This was artificial. This was intelligent. This was a message. Kate's hands moved quickly across her control panel, isolating the signal and running it through the translation matrix. The computer worked for several minutes, comparing the transmission against known alien languages in the Terran database. When the results appeared on her screen, Kate felt her heart skip. The message was from the Zephyrian Republic. Kate had studied the Zephyrians during her training. They were a peaceful species of insectoid beings who lived in the Kepler 442 system, about 30 light-years from Earth. They looked like giant praying mantises but were gentle creatures who loved art and music. They had been trading partners with humanity for 20 years, exchanging their beautiful crystal sculptures for human technology and food. But this message was not about trade. Kate called her supervisor immediately. "Commander Sullivan, you need to hear this. I have an emergency transmission from the Zephyrian system." Commander Jack Sullivan arrived at Kate's station within minutes. He was a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes who had seen too many crises during his career. He looked at the data on Kate's screen and his expression grew serious. "Play it," he said. The translated message filled the bridge with its desperate words. A mechanical voice spoke the translation while the original Zephyrian clicks and whistles played beneath it. "To any civilization receiving this transmission, this is High Commander Zixka of the Zephyrian Defense Fleet. Our system is under attack by the Virex Dominion. They arrived 6 days ago with a massive war fleet. We tried to negotiate, but they refused all communication. They want our worlds for themselves." Sullivan clenched his jaw. The Vrex were bad news. They were a violent empire that conquered other species and turned them into slaves. They strip-mined planets until nothing was left but dead rock, then moved on to the next system. The Terran military had been watching them for years, waiting for the day they might threaten human space. The message continued. "They have destroyed our orbital defenses and taken 3 of our 7 colony worlds. Our remaining ships are badly damaged. We estimate less than 72 hours before they begin bombardment of our home planet. We have moved our civilians into underground shelters, but they will not protect against sustained orbital attack." Kate felt sick listening to the desperation in the translated voice. She had met Zephyrians before during cultural exchange programs. They were kind beings who wrote poetry and created beautiful music with their wing songs. They did not deserve this. "Our defense fleet is scattered and cannot protect our people much longer. The Virex have superior numbers and technology. We have sent this message to all friendly civilizations in range. If anyone receives this transmission, please know that we tried to live in peace. We never harmed others. We only wanted to create beauty in this universe." The message paused, and when it resumed, the mechanical translation could not hide the emotion behind the words. "If there is mercy in the galaxy, please remember us. Remember that the Zephyrian people existed, that we loved our families and our art and our worlds. Do not let the Vrex erase all trace of who we were. This is our final transmission. High Commander Zixka signing off." The bridge fell silent. Kate stared at her console, fighting back tears. Sullivan stood motionless for a long moment, processing what they had just heard. "Get me Captain Park," Sullivan ordered. "And contact Fleet Command immediately. Priority Alpha transmission." Captain Lisa Park arrived 10 minutes later. She was the head of xenological affairs on the station, responsible for all communications with alien species. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and the ability to speak 12 different alien languages fluently. "I heard the message on my way here," Park said. "The Zephyrians are in serious trouble." What do you know about their current military situation? Sullivan asked. Park pulled up tactical data on the main screen. Not good. Their entire defense philosophy is built around avoiding conflict. They have maybe 50 ships total, and most of those are converted civilian vessels. Against a Vrex war fleet, they would not last long. Kate looked up from her station. Sir, there is something else. I did some research on the Zephyrians while you were getting Captain Park. Do you remember the asteroid crisis of 2387? Sullivan thought for a moment. The mining colony disaster? When those asteroids were knocked out of orbit and threatened the civilian settlements? Yes, sir. The Zephyrians were the first to respond. They sent their entire merchant fleet to evacuate our people, even though it put their own ships at risk. They saved over 30,000 human colonists. Park nodded. I remember now. They refused any payment afterward. They said friends help. Friends? No questions asked. Sullivan was quiet for a long time, staring at the tactical display showing the Zephyrian system. Finally, he turned to Kate. Send this data package directly to Admiral Torres at Fleet Command. Mark it emergency priority, and include a full analysis of the Zephyrian situation. Tell him we have friends in trouble. Kate worked quickly, compiling all the information into a secure transmission. As she prepared to send it, she added a personal note that she hoped would not get her in trouble. Admiral Torres, the Zephyrians saved 30,000 human lives during the asteroid crisis. They asked for nothing in return except our friendship. Now they need our help. Please do not let their kindness be forgotten. The transmission shot across space toward Earth at faster than light speed, carrying with it the desperate plea of a dying civilization and the hope that humanity would remember old debts. On Earth, Admiral Ryan Torres received the emergency briefing in his office at Fleet Command Headquarters. He was a veteran of 3 interstellar conflicts and had earned his reputation as a man who never abandoned his allies. As he read through the tactical data, his expression grew darker. Torres had met Zephyrians during diplomatic missions. He remembered their musical language and their gift for creating beautiful things from simple materials. He also remembered how they had risked everything to save human civilians without being asked. Torres walked to his window and looked out at the orbital shipyards surrounding Earth. Hundreds of military vessels hung in space like sleeping giants waiting for orders. The Terran Defense Fleet had been built to protect humanity from exactly this kind of threat. He activated his communication system and spoke to his aide. Get me the fleet captains immediately. Emergency meeting in the war room in 30 minutes. Torres then activated the fleet-wide alert system. His voice echoed through every military vessel within range of Earth. All commands, this is Admiral Torres. We have received a distress call from the Zephyrian Republic. They are under attack by the Vrex Dominion and face extinction within 72 hours. The Zephyrians are our allies and friends. They have helped humanity in the past, and now they need our help. He paused, knowing that his next words would set events in motion that could not be stopped. All available vessels prepare for immediate deployment. Begin combat loading procedures and ready all personnel for extended operations. We have friends to save, and we will not let them die alone. This is Admiral Torres. Execute emergency protocols. Now. Across human space, the largest rescue fleet in history began to assemble. The emergency alert changed everything in human space within minutes. Admiral Torres had barely finished his announcement when the first ships began moving toward Earth. What followed was the largest military mobilization in human history, and it happened faster than anyone thought possible. Captain Amy Chen was enjoying dinner with her family on Luna Colony when her communicator buzzed with the emergency code. She was supposed to be on leave for another week, but the message was clear. All available personnel report immediately. She kissed her husband and children goodbye, not knowing when she would see them again. Amy commanded the cargo vessel Titan's Dream, a massive ship designed to carry supplies between colonies. It was not a warship, but it could carry enough food and medical supplies to support a small army. She reached her ship within an hour and found her crew already preparing for departure. "What's the situation, Captain?" asked her first officer, Lieutenant Bob Martinez. He was a young man who had joined the Merchant Marine to see the galaxy, not to fight wars. "The Zephyrians are in trouble," Amy explained as they walked toward the bridge. "Big trouble, The Vreks are trying to wipe them out and we're going to stop it. Bob looked confused. But we're not a military ship. We carry cargo. Amy smiled grimly. Today we carry hope. Meanwhile, in the military shipyards orbiting Earth, Colonel Mike Davis was pushing his Marines harder than ever before. The 5th Marine Expeditionary Force was the best trained unit in human space, but they had never attempted a deployment this large this quickly. Listen up, Davis shouted to his assembled troops. We have friends dying 30 light years from here. The Zephyrians saved 30,000 human lives during the asteroid crisis. Now it's our turn to save them. I want every Marine, every piece of equipment, and every supply crate loaded and ready in 4 hours. Anyone who thinks that's impossible can explain it to the Zephyrian children hiding in caves while their world burns. The Marines moved like they had never moved before. Loading equipment that normally took days was completed in hours. Soldiers, who were on leave, abandoned their plans and reported for duty. Veterans who had retired came out of retirement and demanded to be allowed to serve. Dr. Helen Wright was working late in her medical research lab when the alert came through. She was a civilian doctor who specialized in alien biology, particularly Zephyrian physiology. She had spent 2 years on the Zephyrian homeworld, learning their medical practices and teaching them human techniques. Helen knew that if the Zephyrians were under attack, they would need medical help that only she could provide. She immediately contacted the Military Medical Corps and volunteered her services. Within 3 hours, she was aboard the hospital ship Mercy, converting entire sections of the vessel into treatment centers for wounded Zephyrians. Doctor, we don't have enough medical supplies for both human and Zephyrian casualties, reported Chief Medical Officer Commander Pete Johnson. Helen looked at the inventory lists and made quick calculations. Strip the supplies from every civilian hospital in the system. Bill it to my personal account. We'll figure out the paperwork later. The orbital shipyards around Earth had never seen anything like what happened next. Ships that had been in maintenance for months were rushed back into service. Civilian vessels were retrofitted with military equipment in record time. Factory workers pulled triple shifts to produce ammunition and spare parts. Commander Lisa Blake watched from the bridge of the cruiser Determination as the fleet continued to grow. Every hour brought more ships. Military vessels arrived from distant patrol routes. Merchant ships volunteered their services. Even private yachts belonging to wealthy citizens joined the fleet, their owners insisting they could help with evacuation efforts. How many ships do we have now? Blake asked her tactical officer. 612, ma'am, and more arriving every hour. I've never seen anything like it. Blake nodded. She had fought in 3 wars, but she had never seen humanity respond to a crisis like this. It was as if every human in space had decided that the Zephyrians were family, and family protected family. The centerpiece of the fleet was the dreadnought USS Liberty, Admiral Torres's flagship. The Liberty was over 1 kilometer long and carried enough firepower to destroy a small moon. It had been designed to fight entire enemy fleets single-handedly, and today it might have to do exactly that. Torres stood on the Liberty's bridge, watching the tactical display as more ships joined the formation. His fleet now included battleships, cruisers, destroyers, carriers, transports, hospital ships, supply vessels, and dozens of civilian craft that had no business being in a war zone. Admiral, the engineering teams are requesting permission to begin weapon modifications on the civilian vessels, reported Captain Danny White, the fleet's chief engineer. Torres considered this carefully. Arming civilian ships was against several interstellar treaties, but so was genocide. Do it. Give them whatever they need to defend themselves and help with the rescue. Danny nodded and began coordinating with the civilian captains. Within hours, cargo ships were being fitted with point defense systems, and passenger liners were being converted into evacuation vessels capable of carrying tens of thousands of refugees. The most surprising addition to the fleet came from an unexpected source. Captain Greg Martinez commanded a small squadron of racing ships, high-speed vessels built for entertainment rather than war. When he heard about the mission, he volunteered his entire racing league. "What can racing ships do in a battle?" asked Torres when Martinez reported for duty. "Admiral, these ships are the fastest things in space. They can outrun anything the Vreks have. perfect for reconnaissance and rescue operations in hostile territory. Torres smiled. This was exactly the kind of thinking that made humans dangerous. Other species would never consider using racing ships in a military operation, but humans saw opportunity where others saw obstacles. As the fleet continued to grow, amazing stories began to emerge. Factory workers had donated their entire savings to buy medical supplies. Retired veterans had come out of retirement to serve as advisors. Children had sent drawings and letters to the Zephyrians, promising that help was coming. One story particularly moved Torres. A group of human artists had created a massive digital artwork showing Zephyrian and human children playing together under a peaceful sky. They transmitted it toward the Zephyrian system with a simple message: "Hold on. We're coming." The final ship to join the fleet was perhaps the most important. The transport vessel New Horizon was the largest civilian ship ever built, designed to carry entire colonies between star systems. Its captain, an elderly woman named Susan Clark, had volunteered to use her ship for refugee evacuation. "Admiral, the New Horizon can carry 2 million people if we pack them in tight," Susan reported. "It won't be comfortable, but it'll keep them alive." Torres looked at the tactical display one final time. 847 ships of every size and description hung in space around Earth, ready to travel 30 light years to save a species they barely knew. It was the largest fleet in human history, and it had assembled in less than 24 hours. "All ships, this is Admiral Torres," he announced to the fleet. "In 30 minutes, we jump to hyperspace. Our destination is the Kepler 442 system, where our friends are fighting for their lives. We go not as conquerors, but as protectors. We go not for glory, but for justice. We go because when good people call for help, humans answer." He paused, looking out at the incredible sight of humanity united in purpose. "Navigation. Set course for Kepler 442. All ships, prepare for hyperspace transition. Today, we show the galaxy what it means to be human." The countdown began, and 847 ships prepared to leap across space to save a dying civilization. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler 442 system and found hell waiting for them. The space around the Zephyrian homeworld glowed with the fires of destruction. Burning pieces of Zephyrian ships drifted through the void like fallen stars. The beautiful blue-green planet that had once been home to billions of peaceful beings was now scarred with orange wounds where Vrex energy weapons had burned through the atmosphere. Admiral Torres stood on the bridge of the USS Liberty, staring at the tactical display with cold fury. 63 Vrex warships hung in orbit around the planet, their dark hulls bristling with weapons. They were methodically bombarding the surface, turning cities into craters and forests into ash. It was not war, it was extermination. "Admiral, we're receiving weak transmissions from the planet's surface," reported Communications Officer Steve Collins. "The Zephyrians are still alive down there, but barely." Torres clenched his jaw as he listened to the translated messages. Zephyrian. Families were huddled in underground shelters, singing their death songs as the world burned above them. Children were asking their parents when the bombing would stop. Parents had no answers to give. "Sir, the Vrex fleet has detected us," announced Tactical Officer Lieutenant Commander Tony Garcia. "They're turning to face us." Torres studied the enemy formation. The Vrex ships were larger than most human vessels, and they had been designed for exactly this kind of overwhelming attack. Their strategy was simple: destroy everything that moved, then strip the planet bare of resources. But Torres had not brought a conventional fleet to fight a conventional battle. "All ships, this is Admiral Torres. Execute Formation Triad." "Repeat. Formation Triad." The human fleet immediately split into 3 separate groups, each with a different mission. It was a tactic that no other species had ever attempted, because it required a level of coordination and trust that most civilizations could not achieve. The first group, led by Captain Greg Martinez and his racing ships, swept wide around the EE system's asteroid belt. These fast, small vessels used the floating rocks as cover while they mapped every Vrex ship and identified weak points in their formation. Martinez had modified his racing ships with the most advanced sensors available, turning them into high-speed scouts. "Liberty, this is Martinez," came his voice over the comm. "I count 63 Vrex vessels. Most are heavy cruisers, but they have 12 dreadnoughts in the center formation. They're arranged in a standard bombardment pattern, which means their defensive coverage has gaps. The second group consisted entirely of medical ships, transports, and rescue vessels protected by a shell of human cruisers and destroyers. Captain Susan Clark's massive transport New Horizon led this group, along with Dr. Helen Wright's hospital ships. Their job was not to fight, but to save lives. Commander Lisa Blake commanded the escort ships protecting the rescue fleet. Her cruiser, Determination, and 15 other warships formed a moving shield around the civilian vessels as they approached the outer moons of the Zephyrian system. "We're picking up Zephyrian survivors on the third moon," reported Blake's sensor officer. "Looks like an emergency shelter with maybe 10,000 civilians." Blake immediately dispatched her fastest ships to begin evacuation operations. Within minutes, human Marines were helping wounded Zephyrians board rescue shuttles while human doctors treated injuries that would have been fatal without immediate care. The main battle group remained with Admiral Torres, but instead of charging straight at the enemy, they did something that confused the Vrex commanders. The human warships spread out in a loose formation and simply waited, as if they were daring the Vrex to attack first. Commander Sarah Mitchell, the fleet's intelligence officer, was busy with a psychological weapon that no military academy had ever taught. She had studied Vrex culture and knew exactly how their minds worked. They respected only strength and feared only the unknown. "Admiral, I'm ready to transmit," Mitchell reported. Torres nodded. "Do it." Mitchell activated the fleet's communication array and broadcast a message on all Vrex frequencies. Her voice was calm and cold as she spoke in perfect Vrex language. "This is Admiral Torres of the Terran Defense Fleet. You are attacking our friends and allies. You have 60 seconds to cease all hostilities and withdraw from the system, or we will demonstrate why the galaxy calls us Deathworlders." The response came immediately. The Vrex fleet commander's voice crackled with arrogance as he replied in broken human language. "Humans are weak mammals from Soft World. You cannot stop. Vrex Dominion. We will destroy you, then finish killing insect creatures." Torres smiled grimly. "Commander Mitchell, did you record that?" "Yes, sir. Perfect evidence of hostile intent." The Vrex attack came exactly as Torres had expected. 63 enemy ships unleashed their full firepower at the human fleet, energy beams and plasma torpedoes lighting up space like a fireworks display. It was enough destructive power to vaporize a small moon. But the human ships were not where the Vrex expected them to be. Captain Danny White had spent the last 24 hours modifying every human vessel with experimental stealth technology. The ships that the Vrex thought they were shooting at were actually holographic projections, while the real human fleet had moved to completely different positions. The Vrex discovered their mistake when human weapons began firing from directions they had not expected. Missile salvos came from above and below their formation. Energy beams struck from angles their sensors insisted were empty space. "All ships, this is Torres. Execute Deathworlder Protocol." What happened next became legendary throughout the galaxy. Human warships began fighting in ways that violated every rule of civilized warfare. When Vrex energy weapons proved superior to human shields, the crews simply shut down life support and rerouted all power to weapons and engines. Captain Julia Roberts commanded a group of converted mining ships that used industrial equipment as weapons. Her vessels launched magnetic harpoons at Vrex cruisers, then used plasma cutters designed for asteroid mining to slice through enemy hulls. Her crews worked in vacuum suits, repairing battle damage while under enemy fire. The Vrex had never seen anything like it. Other species would retreat when their ships were damaged. Humans kept fighting even when their vessels were falling apart around them. When conventional weapons were not enough, they improvised. When tactics were not working, they adapted. Lieutenant Commander Tony Garcia's fighter squadrons pioneered what became known as the death dive maneuver. His small ships flew directly through Vrex energy barriers, accepting catastrophic damage to their craft in exchange for close-range attacks on enemy weak points. Pilots ejected from burning fighters, only to be picked up by rescue shuttles and immediately launched in new ships. This is Garcia to all fighters. Remember, we're not trying to win a fair fight, we're trying to save our friends. Fair fights are for sports. This is war. The psychological impact on the Virex was devastating. They had expected to face a rescue fleet of frightened mammals. Instead, they were fighting an enemy that seemed to treat impossible odds as a personal challenge. Human ships continued operating, even after losing primary systems. Crews performed repairs under direct enemy fire. Damaged vessels rammed Vrex positions rather than retreat. Commander Ben Parker's stealth frigates managed to infiltrate the Vrex command formation using advanced cloaking technology. Instead of attempting sabotage, Parker did something the Vrex found incomprehensible. He broadcast the real-time tactical situation directly to every Virex ship, showing their commanders exactly how badly the battle was going. The broadcast included damage assessments, casualty reports, and tactical analysis that proved the Vrex were losing despite their superior numbers and firepower. More importantly, it showed Vrex crews exactly how the humans were fighting, with desperate courage and complete disregard for their own safety. "They fight like the universe is trying to kill them," reported one Vrex captain to his commander. "They do not fear death, they fear failure." The Vrex command structure began to fracture as ship captains started questioning orders and requesting permission to withdraw. They had been told that humans were weak creatures from a soft world. They had not been prepared to fight an enemy that seemed to thrive in conditions that would kill most other species. Admiral Torres watched the tactical display as Vrex formations began to waver. This was the moment he had been waiting for. All ships, execute Protocol 7. And with those words, the human fleet did something that no Vrex commander could understand or predict. Protocol 7 changed everything in the Kepler 442 system. When Admiral Torres gave that order, every human ship immediately stopped firing at Vrex vessels and instead turned their weapons toward a completely different target: the orbital bombardment, beams that were still destroying the planet below. The Vrex commanders watched in complete confusion as their enemies suddenly ignored the battle and focused entirely on protecting Zephyrian civilians. Human warships flew directly into the bombardment zones, using their own hulls as shields to block the energy beams hitting the planet's surface. "What are they doing?" demanded Vrex Fleet Commander Krektal from his flagship. "Why do they protect the insects instead of fighting us?" His tactical officer had no answer. In Vrex culture, civilian casualties were just part of war. The idea of risking military assets to protect non-combatants made no sense to them. Captain Amy Chen's massive cargo ship, Titan's Dream, positioned itself directly between a Vrex dreadnought and a Zephyrian city. The enemy energy beam struck her ship's hull instead of the population center below. Amy's crew worked frantically to keep their shields operating while thousands of Zephyrian families ran for deeper shelters. "Captain, our hull is taking massive damage," reported her first officer, Bob Martinez. "We can't take much more of this." Amy looked at the tactical display showing the city below. 2 million Zephyrians lived there, including the families she had met during trade missions. Children who had sung her their beautiful wing songs. Artists who had given her crystal sculptures as gifts. "Hold position," Amy ordered. "We don't move until every civilian is safe." The Titan's Dream shuddered under another direct hit. Hull breaches appeared on 3 decks, but the crew sealed them quickly and kept the shields running. Amy's ship was being slowly destroyed, but the city below remained intact. Similar scenes played out across the battle zone. Human ships of every size sacrificed themselves to protect Zephyrian population centers. Hospital ships moved into bombardment zones to evacuate wounded civilians. Fighter squadrons flew suicide missions to destroy Vrex orbital platforms. Dr. Helen Wright's medical ship Mercy had transformed into a floating city of refugees. Thousands of wounded Zephyrians filled every corridor and cargo bay. Helen and her medical teams worked without rest, treating injuries that ranged from energy burns to collapsed lung chambers. "Doctor, we have another transport incoming with 500 wounded," reported Chief Medical Officer Pete Johnson. "But we're already over capacity." Helen looked around at the crowded medical bays. Zephyrian families huddled together on makeshift beds, while human medics worked to save lives. In one corner, a group of Zephyrian children were teaching human nurses how to sing healing songs. "Make room," Helen said simply. "We'll fit them somehow." Meanwhile, the battle continued to rage around them. The Vreks were discovering that fighting humans was like fighting a force of nature rather than a military. When human ships lost main engines, they used maneuvering thrusters to ram enemy vessels. When weapon systems failed, crews threw anything they could find out the airlocks, including their own furniture. Captain Julia Roberts's mining ships had become the most feared vessels in the battle. Her crews had decades of experience working in the deadly environment of space, and they used that knowledge to devastating effect. When conventional weapons ran out of ammunition, they began launching mining charges directly at Vreks hulls. "Roberts, to all mining vessels," she announced over the comm. "Remember, we've been working in vacuum and radiation our whole careers. These Vreks have been living in comfortable ships. Let's show them what real spacers can do." Her ship, the Iron Mountain, had been designed to break apart asteroids the size of cities. When a Vreks cruiser got too close, Roberts simply activated her mining beam and carved the enemy vessel in half like it was made of soft cheese. The psychological impact on the Vreks was becoming critical. They had been trained to fight civilized species who followed predictable rules of engagement. Humans followed no rules except one: protect the innocent at any cost. Commander Ben Parker's stealth ships were now broadcasting live footage of the human rescue operations directly to Vreks crew quarters. Vreks soldiers watched in amazement as human Marines carried wounded Zephyrian children to safety while under direct fire. They saw human doctors treating injured Zephyrians with the same care they would give their own families. "The mammals care more about the insects than about winning," reported one confused Vreks officer to his commander. "They are willing to die for creatures they barely know." This was a concept that broke Vreks' military doctrine. In their empire, soldiers fought for conquest and glory. The idea of dying to protect another species was incomprehensible to them. The turning point came when Captain Greg Martinez's racing ships achieved something impossible. His fast vessels had been mapping the Vreks fleet for hours, looking for weaknesses. Martinez had noticed that the Vreks command ship was positioned in the center of their formation, surrounded by protective vessels. "Admiral Torres, this is Martinez. I think I can get through to their command ship, but it's a one-way trip." Torres understood immediately. "Negative, Martinez. We don't sacrifice people for tactical advantage." "Sir, with respect, I'm not sacrificing myself for tactical advantage. I'm doing it to save the Zephyrians." Before Torres could respond, Martinez and his racing squadron launched their final attack. Their ships were the fastest in space, but they were not built for combat. Martinez knew that once they started this run, they would not be coming back. The racing ships streaked through the Vreks formation like shooting stars, dodging energy beams and missile salvos with incredible skill. Martinez's ship took hit after hit, but he kept flying. His goal was not to destroy the Vreks command ship, but to broadcast one final message directly to the enemy commander. Martinez's damaged ship slammed into the Vreks flagship's communication array just as he transmitted his message to every Vreks vessel in the system. The transmission was simple: video footage of Zephyrian families saying thank you to human rescuers in their musical language. The impact was immediate and devastating to Vreks morale. These soldiers had been told they were conquering a worthless insect species. Now they were watching those same insects show gratitude and love to the humans who were dying to save them. Vreks crew members began questioning their orders. Ship captains started requesting permission to withdraw. Some vessels simply stopped firing and began moving away from the planet. Admiral Torres recognized the moment when the enemy's will to fight began to collapse. The Vreks were not evil monsters. They were soldiers following orders from an empire that taught them to see other species as resources to be harvested. But when faced with an enemy that would die to protect strangers, their entire worldview started to crumble. "All Vreks vessels, this is Admiral Torres," he broadcast on all frequencies. "You have seen what humans will do to protect our friends. You have seen that we will sacrifice our own ships and our own lives to save people we barely know. This is what makes us different from you." Torres paused, letting his words sink in. Your empire teaches you that strength comes from conquest. We know that true strength comes from protecting those who cannot protect themselves. Your commanders sent you here to destroy a peaceful civilization. We came here to save them. The Vrek's response was not what anyone expected. Instead of defiance or anger, there was silence. Ship after ship in the Vrek's fleet simply stopped firing. Some began moving away from the planet. Others requested permission to send medical aid to wounded Zephyrians. Commander Sarah Mitchell monitored Vrek's communications and reported to Torres. Sir, their fleet is falling apart. Ship captains are refusing orders. Some are asking if they can help with rescue operations. Torres looked at the tactical display. The battle was ending, but not because either side had been destroyed. It was ending because the Vreks had seen something they had never encountered before. An enemy that fought not for conquest but for compassion. All human vessels cease fire, Torres ordered. Begin full rescue operations. Today we show the galaxy what it really means to be human. 3 days after the battle ended, the Kepler 442 system looked completely different. Where once there had been the fires of destruction, now there were the lights of hope. Human ships worked alongside surviving Zephyrian vessels to rescue civilians from the damaged planet below. The massive human transport New Horizon had become a floating city, home to over 1 million Zephyrian refugees. Captain Susan Clark walked through the corridors of her ship, amazed at what she saw. Zephyrian families had set up small living spaces in cargo bays and storage rooms. Human crew members were learning Zephyrian songs while Zephyrian children drew pictures of the humans who had saved them. Despite the crowded conditions, there was an atmosphere of gratitude and hope. Captain Clark, called High Commander Zixka, the Zephyrian military leader who had sent the original distress signal. He approached on his 4 insect-like legs, his large compound eyes reflecting the ship's lights. My people wish to thank you again for what you have done. Susan smiled at the tall, mantis-like being. Commander, we only did what friends do for each other. The Zephyrians saved human lives during the asteroid crisis. We could not let you face extinction alone. Zixka's antennae twitched in what Susan had learned was a sign of deep emotion. Your species amazes us. You traveled 30 light years and risked your entire fleet to save people you barely knew. In our culture, such sacrifice is the highest form of honor. Meanwhile, on the planet's surface, Dr. Nathan Clark was leading the largest ecological restoration project in galactic history. The Vrek's bombardment had left huge scars across the Zephyrian homeworld, but Nathan's teams were working with Zephyrian scientists to develop new ways to heal the damage. Dr. Clark, look at this, called Dr. Vex T, a Zephyrian biologist. She pointed her thin arm toward a crater that had been lifeless just days before. Green shoots were already growing in the specially treated soil. Nathan knelt down to examine the new growth. Your bioregeneration techniques are incredible. At this rate, we can have forests growing again within months instead of decades. The Zephyrian scientists' wings buzzed with excitement. Human technology and Zephyrian biology working together, we are creating something neither species could achieve alone. But the most important changes were happening far beyond the Kepler 442 system. The battle had been monitored by dozens of other civilizations through long-range sensors, and news of humanity's response was spreading across the galaxy faster than light. Ambassador Kelly Morgan found herself busier than ever as representatives from dozens of species requested meetings with human diplomats. Her office on Earth had become the center of galactic attention as the political implications of the Zephyrian rescue became clear. Ambassador Morgan, said the representative from the Altarian Federation, a tall, blue-skinned being with silver. My government wishes to understand why humans would risk so much for another species. This behavior is unusual. Kelly looked out the window at Earth's busy space lanes, where ships from dozens of worlds now came to trade and learn from humanity. Ambassador Vel 9, it's simple. We believe that intelligence and compassion are rare gifts in the universe. When we find them, we protect them. The Altarian's silver eyes widened. Even at great cost to yourselves? Especially then, Kelly replied. The cost of losing friends is always greater than the cost of saving them. News reports from across the galaxy told the same story. The Terran Defense Fleet had not just won a battle. They had fundamentally changed how other species viewed both humans and warfare itself. Military academies began studying human tactics, not for their weapons or strategy, but for their willingness to sacrifice military advantage to protect civilians. The humans fought like madmen, reported General Krixval of the Syrian Defense Corps to his government. They accepted losses that would have ended any civilized engagement. When their ships were damaged, they kept fighting. When their weapons failed, they improvised. When victory seemed impossible, they changed the definition of victory. The most dramatic change was happening within the Vrex Empire itself. The fleet that had attacked the Zephyrians returned home with stories that shook their entire military structure. Vrex soldiers who had witnessed human compassion began questioning the Empire's brutal methods. Fleet Commander Krek Tal, who had led the attack on the Zephyrian system, found himself facing a court-martial for failure to complete the mission. But his testimony before the Vrex High Command would be remembered throughout history. The humans did not defeat us with superior weapons or tactics, Krek Tal told the assembled commanders. They defeated us with something we do not understand: the willingness to die for strangers. Our soldiers watched humans sacrifice their own ships to protect Zephyrian civilians. They saw human doctors treating wounded Zephyrians with the same care they would show their own families. He paused, his scarred face showing the stress of trying to explain something his own culture had no words for. How do you fight an enemy that values the lives of your targets more than their own victory? How do you conquer a species that will risk everything to protect people they barely know? Our entire military doctrine assumes that all species are motivated by self-interest. The humans proved that assumption wrong. Within months of the Zephyrian rescue, the first anti-Vrex coalition formed. Species that had submitted to Vrex expansion out of fear now looked to humanity as proof that the Empire could be challenged. Human military advisors began training other species in what became known as Deathworlder tactics. Captain Mike Davis, now promoted to general, found himself teaching alien soldiers how to think like humans. His first lesson was simple but revolutionary. Your equipment will fail. Your plans will go wrong. Your situation will become impossible. When that happens, you have two choices: give up or get creative. Humans always choose creative. The changes reached even the most peaceful corners of the galaxy. The meditation. Monks of Kepler-186, a species known for their absolute pacifism, sent a message to Earth that surprised everyone. To the warriors of Terra, their message read, "We who have never raised a weapon in anger salute you. You have shown that true strength is not the power to destroy, but the will to protect. You have proven that the warrior's greatest victory is not conquest, but compassion." A year after the rescue, Ambassador Kelly Morgan addressed the Galactic Council for the first time since the crisis. The Great Hall was filled with representatives from hundreds of species, all eager to hear from the people who had changed the galaxy's understanding of warfare and heroism. "Fellow beings," Kelly began, "we came to this council today not as conquerors or leaders but as friends. 1 year ago, we received a distress call from the Zephyrian Republic. We responded not because we had to, but because we chose to. That choice reflects something fundamental about humanity. We believe that in a universe full of darkness, every light matters." She paused, looking around the Great Hall at the dozens of species represented there. The Zephyrians are not the only civilization that has faced extinction. They will not be the last. But as long as humans exist in this galaxy, no species will face that darkness alone. When you call for help, we will answer. When you are threatened, we will stand with you. When you fall, we will lift you up. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Species after species rose to pledge their support for the new alliance that was forming around human leadership. The Galactic Protection Pact was born that day, uniting dozens of civilizations in a promise to protect each other. Captain Amy Chen, now Admiral Chen, watched the ceremony from her flagship, the rebuilt Titan's Dream. Beside her stood High Commander Zixka, now serving as the Zephyrian representative to the new alliance. Admiral Chen Zixka said in his musical voice. When we sent that distress signal, we hoped someone might remember us after we were gone. We never imagined that someone would come to save us. Amy smiled as she watched ships from dozens of species flying in formation around Earth. Commander, that's the difference between hope and humanity. Hope remembers the dead. Humanity saves the living. In the end, the phrase, "an SOS reached the Deathworlders," became more than just a historical reference. It became a promise that echoed across the galaxy. When good people were in trouble, when innocent lives were threatened, when darkness seemed to be winning, somewhere in the void, humans were listening. And humans always answered the call.